The Miami Dolphins just got embarrassed again this season on Monday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans, one of the worst teams in the league. They were 0-3 heading into tonight, and they basically dominated the Dolphins from start to finish in this ballgame. The Dolphins never held a lead. The Titans really just controlled it on both sides of the ball. Line of scrimmage, the Dolphins could not run the football. They could not stop the run against the Titans. The Dolphins really never had a realistic chance to win this game at any point of this ball game. And so I am here to say that the Miami Dolphins season in week number 4 is officially over. This team is not going to be making the playoffs, trying to get anywhere close to making the playoffs. And I think really at this point, they should throw in the towel and really just try and tank for a top draft pick next year. Because at this point, what is the point of trying to win these meaningless games and win maybe 6-7 games, get outside the top 10 of the draft position? That's only going to hurt your team. And it's just so clear that this team is not going to be making a postseason appearance. And even if they somehow sneak in, that Tua comes back from his concussion, he plays really well, leads the Dolphins to like the 7th seed or 6th seed in the playoffs. The Dolphins are not going on the road in Baltimore, in Buffalo, in Kansas City. They are not doing that and winning in round number 1. We saw it even last year when it was even a better version of the current team the Dolphins had. They got absolutely pummeled by Kansas City because they don't perform well against good teams and they don't perform well in the cold. And for the future of this team, I do think it's time for the Dolphins to completely blow up their organization, their roster, and start from scratch all over again. The Dolphins this offseason had a completely opposite philosophy of what any rational team and organization would do. The Dolphins a season ago did win 11 games. It was their best season since 2008 when they won the AFC East. The last time that they did, actually, using the Wildcat, and that was the year that Tom Brady also suffered his ACL injury. But needless to say, that season ended horribly, like many of the Dolphins season has in recent memory. They choked down the stretch. They really struggled late in the season once again. They did have multiple injuries, and that was kind of an excuse that a lot of Dolphin fans and people in the media used to really portray the Dolphins as some Super Bowl caliber team heading into this season. But it was clear to anybody that knew the Dolphins roster and really knew what this team was made of that this was nowhere close to a Super Bowl caliber team. And after losing Christian Wilkins, after losing Connor Williams, after losing Robert Hunt, and signing more older veterans, that the roster talent was worse than a season ago. But I think the thing that screams dysfunction the most is that the Dolphins, after getting blown out in a playoff game, they decided to extend every single major piece of their organization. Mike McDaniel, take a contract extension. Tyreek Hill, take a contract extension. Jalen Ramsey, take a contract extension. Jalen Waddle, take a contract extension. Tua Tagovailoa, take a contract extension. And none of these guys achieved anything for the Dolphins so far in their tenure. If you want to count playoff appearances as achieving something, you go right ahead. But in the NFL, in the big leagues, you count playoff wins, you count championships, and the Dolphins have neither of those since Mike McDaniel, since Tua, since Tyreek Hill, since Ramsey, since all of these players and coaches have shown up. The Dolphins have absolutely nothing to show for it. And Chris Greer and Stephen Ross and the organization shout out extensions to all of these parties after a huge blowout loss in the wild card round. If that doesn't scream dysfunction to you, I don't know what else will, because the Dolphins were not anywhere close to winning a Super Bowl last year. They were 1-6 against playoff teams. They were terrible in the cold. They had a very specific way to win games, and that was basically against bad defenses that could not counter the Dolphins' offensive system, which has proven to be pretty easy to negate if you just have a good defensive coordinator who knows to throw out the timing of the offense, make sure Tua can't pass it to his first read in the middle of the field. And if you do those two things, the Dolphins' offense will struggle to score 20 points. And I think the last 7 or 8 games, dating back to last season, the Dolphins have scored over 20 points only one time. And for all the Dolphin fans who are going to say, it's just because Tua is injured. When Tua was playing, the Dolphins were some great team. Those games are with Tua included. Tua has not scored over 20 points since, I believe, on Christmas against the Dallas Cowboys last season. Since then, he got blown out by the Baltimore Ravens. He choked against the Buffalo Bills. He got blown out by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Jaguars game this season, the offense was really bad for most of the game. And then the Buffalo Bills game, when Tua got knocked out, the offense had 10 points. Tua scored 7 points for the Bills with his pick 6. So Tua only scored 3 more points for his own team than he did for his division rival. All that to say that just because of Tua's injuries, that's where the Dolphins are now struggling. That is not the case whatsoever. Tua and this offense have not been good for quite a long time now. And they were never good against playoff teams, against great defenses, and in prime time or in the cold or really any other environment outside of a 1 p.m. game in Miami against a bottom-feeding team. I think another huge mistake that Chris Grier and the Dolphins made is they did not get a competent backup quarterback behind Tua Tagovailoa, who is by far the most injury-prone player probably in the entire NFL, but we'll just say quarterback for that matter. They knew that he was one hit away from suffering another concussion that would take him out for multiple weeks, and their backup plan was a 7th-round pick from 3 years ago in Skylar Thompson, who really shouldn't even be on an NFL roster if you just watch him play. And then once Skylar got hurt against Seattle, he wasn't even good before he got hurt. They then put in Tim Boyle, who is another guy that shouldn't even be on an NFL roster. And then tonight against the Tennessee Titans, it was Tyler Huntley, who I think has also proven that he's not a very great quarterback either and probably shouldn't be starting any games for you at all. So on top of extending all of these players and Mike McDaniel after they achieved nothing, and then not addressing the backup quarterback position after you just paid Tua $50 million a season, you're not going to get a competent backup to ensure that if he does go down, that your season doesn't go down the drain. It's just mind-blowing incompetence by the Dolphins, and I definitely think Chris Grier has to go. He's been with the Dolphins organization for over 20 years. He's been the general manager for the team, I think, since like 2016, 2017. It's kind of a blurry line when Grier took over as the full-time GM for the Dolphins. But we'll just say around 2016 as he took over as general manager. And in those 8 seasons, the Dolphins have 0 playoff wins. And since Grier has joined the Dolphins, again, 0 playoff wins. Ironically enough, the last Miami Dolphins playoff win in the year 2000 was the last year before Chris Grier joined the Miami Dolphins organization. You just cannot make things up like that. You can't make it up. Chris Grier has to go. He can no longer be the GM of this team. I think with Mike McDaniel, everything is on the table. This team is very undisciplined. There's so many pre-snap penalties. It feels like this team doesn't even practice. I mean, there's just so many boneheaded plays. Nobody's ever on the same page. So clearly he's not disciplining the team during practice and making sure that these issues do not show themselves every single week, because it's a recurring problem, and it has been the entire tenure of Mike McDaniel. He's definitely not a motivating head coach, because the last 2 weeks, the Dolphins just look completely dead at halftime. So maybe he's just a good scheme coach, but then again, his offense hasn't been good in like 8-9 games now. The Dolphins are the lowest scoring team in the league. It's like, what is Mike McDaniel bringing to the table at this point? I'm still not totally out on McDaniel, because I do think he's a very clever mind. He's a lot of experience with Kyle Shanahan and the Shanahan tree. So I do think he knows what he's doing, but I just feel like he's kind of spiraling at this point. He's kind of lost his way a little bit, and I don't know exactly how he's going to get that back, or even if it's in Miami for him to properly do that. And then lastly, Tua Tagovailoa, he is not the future of this team. I know the Dolphins just gave him a massive contract this offseason, but there's actually a built-in out in the deal where the Dolphins can move on from him, I think, before March 14th in 2025. And if they do that, I think they get out of the final 2 years of his deal, so they only have to owe his 2025 salary, which, you know, would have to suck to pay for him to not be on your team. But I think Tua has proven himself to be a limited player, where given the right circumstances, he can be a pretty good quarterback. But again, in the cold against good teams, or having him rise above the scheme, make plays off script, I just don't think it's there for him to really be able to compete with the Lamar Jacksons, the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, the Joe Burrows, all those other elite, truly electrifying quarterbacks across the league. Tua is never going to be able to consistently go head-to-head against those quarterbacks and bring the Dolphins on a road to the Super Bowl. It's just never going to happen. He just does not have the physical capabilities. He's a bottom 5 arm in the league. He's got bottom 5 athleticism in the league, and he can't take a real hit. So he can't scramble, he can't run, or he's a huge risk to suffer another concussion or another injury. He's just so limited to being a pocket passer who has to get the ball out quick because you don't want him to take a hit. And then again, he can't play off script, and he can't consistently throw outside the numbers because of his arm. I mean, he's just such a limited player. And when you combine his very scary injury history, I just don't see how the Dolphins go into next season with him being the only real asset at the quarterback position. I'm not talking about going out and signing like an Andy Dalton or another veteran quarterback to be the backup. You need somebody that you can really invest in, where if Tua goes down and his career is over, you're just not completely blindsided. So I think the Dolphins, who I do think are going to be picking inside the top 10 now, they have to spend that pick on a quarterback. Cam Ward is a guy that's been really popular since he does play for the Miami Hurricanes. He plays in Hard Rock Stadium. You have Shedeur Sanders. He's personally become one of my favorites just watching him week after week with Colorado. The Dolphins will have some options. I just think it comes down to Will Stephen Ross move on from Chris Greer in this current iteration of the Dolphins organization? Because if he doesn't, I feel like they're going to try and convince him that keeping Tua is in the best interest of the team, and going out and getting like a Joe Flacco or Andy Dalton is the right solution. And I just don't think personally that is the right move for the Dolphins. But another very embarrassing performance from the Miami Dolphins. I think they really need to consider some serious change. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think about the Miami Dolphins and what you think they should do going forward and how you think they will finish this year. But subscribe to the channel if you are new. Drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.